The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after humanity had vanished from the galaxy. It was addressed to the Galactic Council and marked with the highest priority codes. The transmission came from Earth, and it was signed by Admiral Hanul Park, speaking for all human colonies. Councillor Veltar read the message aloud to the emergency assembly. His voice shook slightly as he spoke the words that every species in the galaxy had been hoping to hear. Greetings to the Galactic Council. We have received your requests for assistance with the current crisis affecting galactic civilization. We appreciate your offers of full membership, territorial concessions, and technology-sharing agreements. After careful consideration, we must respectfully decline your invitation to return to galactic affairs. The silence in the chamber was complete. 200 species had sent representatives to hear humanity's response to their desperate plea for help. They had been prepared for negotiations, demands, or conditions. They had not been prepared for a simple rejection. Veltar continued reading. Humanity has found our current path of independent development to be both fulfilling and productive. We wish the Galactic Council success in resolving the challenges currently facing your civilization. This will be our final communication on this matter. Councillor Zixandra was the first to break the silence. They cannot be serious, she said. The galaxy is collapsing around us. Entire species are facing extinction. How can they simply walk away? But Admiral Hanul's message was clear. Humanity was not coming back. The year leading up to that message had been the worst in galactic history. 14 separate wars were raging across the galaxy. The Kalari-Vrex conflict had drawn in 6 other species and showed no signs of ending. Without human mediation, every dispute escalated into violence. Every misunderstanding became a reason for war. 23 worlds faced complete ecological collapse. The atmospheric processors designed by Dr. Xungye No were failing one by one. Entire populations were being evacuated to refugee camps on other worlds, but the camps were overcrowded and running out of supplies. The Zephyrian plague had become a pandemic affecting 12 different species. It had mutated 3 more times, becoming more deadly with each change. Dr. Yujin Han had left behind encrypted research data that could save billions of lives, but accessing it required cooperation between species that had spent the past year, blaming each other for humanity's departure. The encryption was particularly cruel in its design. The data could only be unlocked if representatives from 5 specific species worked together to enter their access codes simultaneously. But those 5 species were currently at war with each other. The humans planned this, said Dr. Vexton, during one of many failed attempts to break the encryption. They knew we would need this information, and they made sure we could only get it by doing the one thing we seem incapable of doing. What is that? Asked Dr. Mire. Working together, instead of fighting. The economic collapse was complete. The Nexus Trade Hub had closed after a cascade failure destroyed its main computer systems. Smaller trading stations had either shut down or been converted into refugee shelters. Species that had depended on interstellar trade for survival were facing starvation. The Xerillian crystal miners had been forced to eat their mining equipment because they could not trade crystals for food. The Rillan manufacturing worlds had gone dark because they could not import the raw materials needed to keep their factories running. Even the wealthy core worlds were rationing basic supplies. Commander Minjae Quan had led humanity's departure, so thoroughly that it left no trace for others to follow. Every attempt to locate human colonies had failed. The galaxy's best scouts and explorers had searched hundreds of star systems without finding a single clue about where humanity had gone. It is like they simply decided to exist somewhere else, reported Explorer Captain Dexmar after returning from his 3rd unsuccessful search mission. We have found no warp signatures, no debris, no settlements, nothing. They have vanished, more completely than any species in galactic history. The Galactic Council had finally authorized what they had refused to consider for over a century. They offered humanity full voting membership with equal representation. They promised territorial concessions that would give human colonies the same rights as the oldest galactic powers. They agreed to technology-sharing agreements that would recognize human patents and intellectual property. It was everything humanity had asked for during 70 years of participation in galactic affairs. And it had come exactly 1 year too late. The automated systems that engineer Ji-hyun Song had left as her final gift to the galaxy were reaching their programmed shutdown date. She had designed them to maintain essential infrastructure for exactly 18 months after the last human authorization code was entered. That deadline was now 3 weeks away. When the systems shut down, we will lose life support on 40% of inhabited space stations, reported Chief Engineer Kolvar during an emergency briefing. We will lose power distribution on 60% of developed worlds. We will lose traffic control for all major shipping lanes. The briefing was being given to a joint committee of representatives from 50 different species. It was the largest cooperative effort the galaxy had seen since humanity's departure, but it had taken the threat of complete civilization collapse to make it happen. "Can we prevent the shutdown?" asked Councillor Ramesh. "The systems require human authorization codes that change every day based on quantum algorithms," Kolvar explained. "Without access to the base code generators, we cannot predict what tomorrow's codes will be. The humans designed it so that only they could keep the systems running. Some species accused humanity of sabotage, others called it terrorism, but the more thoughtful leaders recognized it for what it really was, a lesson in consequences. Humanity had built systems that worked perfectly as long as they were treated as equal partners in galactic civilization. When that partnership ended, the systems ended too. The younger species in the galaxy were adapting faster than their elders. The Keplerians, who had been considered too primitive for council membership just 5 years earlier, had formed an alliance with 3 other developing civilizations. They were implementing governance models based on human examples they had studied. "The humans taught us that cooperation works better than domination," explained Keplerian Ambassador Yextara during a recent trade negotiation. "We are building our alliance on that principle." The old powers watched these developments with growing alarm. Species that had never been allowed meaningful participation in galactic affairs were suddenly forming their own trading networks and defense agreements. They were solving problems using human-inspired methods while the traditional galactic powers continued to argue about jurisdiction and precedent. But for most of the galaxy, these small successes were overshadowed by the approaching deadline. In 3 weeks, the lights would go out across galactic civilization. Life support systems would fail. Power grids would collapse. The infrastructure that supported trillions of lives would simply stop working, and there was nothing anyone could do to prevent it. Speaker Jiho An had received the Galactic Council's formal apology and plea for humanity's return. His response had been polite, professional, and absolutely final. Humanity appreciated the Council's acknowledgement of past mistakes, but they had moved on to new opportunities. The galaxy was on its own. Councillor Veltar stood in the empty council chamber late at night, looking at the chair where Ambassador Jinho Park used to sit. For 30 years, the human had participated in every major decision affecting galactic civilization. He had offered solutions, mediated disputes, and quietly prevented countless crises from escalating into disasters. Veltar finally understood what they had lost when that chair became empty. They had not just lost a participant in galactic affairs. They had lost the one species that could see connections between problems and create solutions that worked for everyone. Without that perspective, the galaxy was falling apart one crisis at a time, and there was no one left who knew how to put it back together. The lights went out exactly 18 months after humanity's departure, just as engineer Ji-hyun Song had programmed them to do. Power grids failed across 200 worlds. Life support systems shut down on 40% of space stations. Traffic. Control networks that had guided ships safely through space lanes for decades simply stopped working. But the galaxy did not collapse into chaos as everyone had expected. Instead, something remarkable happened. The younger species that had been learning from human examples for the past 2 years were ready. They had spent months preparing for this moment, building new systems based on principles they had learned from human teachers like Dr. Kyung-min. Oh, and Captain Hajun Yu. On the trading world of HFY, Ambassador Yexitara activated emergency power systems that her people had built using human engineering concepts. The systems were simpler than the ones engineer Ji-hyun had designed, but they worked. More importantly, they had been built by Keplerians who understood how they worked. "We are no longer dependent on technology we cannot maintain," she announced to her people. "We have learned to build our own solutions." Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds where younger species had formed new alliances. The Rillan manufacturing worlds switched to locally designed power grids. The Zerillian mining colonies activated communication networks based on principles Dr. Soo-young Lee had taught their engineers before she left. These new systems were not as advanced as the human-designed infrastructure they replaced, but they had one crucial advantage. The people using them understood how they worked. The old powers of the Galactic Council watched these developments with growing alarm. Species they had dismissed as primitive were suddenly operating independent, trading networks and defense alliances. Worlds that had never been allowed meaningful participation in galactic affairs were now ignoring the Council entirely. The Wu Jin Accords, named after humanity's last ambassador Wu Jin Seo, became the foundation for this new galactic order. The agreement was signed by 37 species that had committed to governing themselves using human-inspired principles. The accords established simple rules for cooperation. Disputes would be resolved through mediation rather than force. Technology would be shared freely between alliance members. Decisions would be made by consensus rather than by the strongest species imposing their will on others. "The humans taught us that problems can be solved without violence," explained Keplerian Council leader Dexara during the signing ceremony. "They showed us that sharing knowledge makes everyone stronger, not weaker." The accords also included something the Galactic Council had never offered. Membership was open to any species willing to follow the cooperation principles, regardless of their military power or economic influence. Dr. Soyeon Ryu had left behind a gift that took 2 years to fully understand. Hidden in the educational networks she had built for younger species were distributed knowledge systems that activated only after humanity's departure. These systems began teaching participating species to think like humans. The lessons were not about technology or science. They were about connections and patterns. They taught students to look for relationships between different problems. They encouraged innovation over tradition. Most importantly, they emphasized finding solutions that worked for everyone instead of just the strongest group. Young Keplerian scientist Nexvin discovered this while studying the plague that was still affecting several species. Using human-taught analysis methods, she found connections that traditional alien medicine had missed. "The disease spreads faster in populations that are under stress," she reported to the Alliance Medical Council. "If we reduce the stress factors, we can slow the spread even without nanobiotic treatment." It was not a cure, but it was progress. More importantly, it was progress made using human ways of thinking applied by non-human minds. The great alien civilizations that had dominated the galaxy for millennia were struggling to adapt to this new reality. The hegemony still controlled vast territories and powerful fleets, but their trading partners were disappearing. The coalition still had advanced technology, but their trade routes were being replaced by alliance networks. Councillor Veltar watched his influence shrink with each passing month. Species that had once sought council approval for major decisions were now handling their own affairs. The monthly council sessions that had once been attended by hundreds of representatives now drew maybe 50 participants. We are becoming irrelevant, he admitted to Counselor Zixandra during a private meeting. The younger species are building their own civilization and leaving us behind. Zixandra refused to accept this reality. They will realize their mistake eventually, she insisted. These primitive alliance systems cannot replace the stability and order that the Council has provided for thousands of years. But the evidence suggested otherwise. The alliance worlds were experiencing less conflict, more innovation, and greater prosperity than the remaining Council territories. They had solved problems that the traditional powers could not handle. The Zephyrian plague that had threatened to destroy multiple species was finally brought under control through alliance cooperation. 5 different species worked together to share medical knowledge and resources. It was exactly the kind of cooperation that Dr. Yujin Han had tried to encode in her research systems. The war between the Kelari and Vrex ended when both species joined the alliance and agreed to human-style mediation. Ambassador Yextara personally led the peace negotiations, using techniques that Captain Taeho Kim had taught her years earlier. We spent 2 years fighting each other instead of solving the original problem, admitted Kalari Commander Wu Jin, after signing the peace agreement. The humans would have prevented this war from starting. But the humans were still gone, and there were no signs they would return. Researcher Yunji Nam of the Alliance Historical Archive made a discovery that changed how everyone thought about humanity's departure. While studying old human communications, she found records that revealed humanity's true intentions. The records showed that humans had never intended to become essential to galactic civilization. They had simply done what they always did, identified problems and created solutions. But they had designed their solutions to work whether humans were present or not. The educational systems Dr. Soyeon had built were meant to teach other species to solve problems independently. The infrastructure engineer Ji Hyun had created was designed to force a transition to locally maintained systems. Even the encryption locks Dr. Yujin had used were intended to encourage cooperation rather than dependence. They were not trying to make themselves necessary, Yunji explained in her report. They were trying to make themselves unnecessary. Every system they built was designed to teach us how to succeed without them. The realization was both humbling and inspiring. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy. They had graduated it. 5 years after the silent exodus, the galaxy received one final transmission from Admiral Hanul Park. The message was broadcast to every inhabited world simultaneously, using communication protocols that no species recognized, but somehow reached everyone perfectly. "We have been watching your progress," the message began. "We are proud of what you have accomplished in our absence. You have learned to work together instead of fighting. You have learned to share knowledge instead of hoarding it. You have learned to solve problems through cooperation instead of domination." The message included star charts pointing beyond the galactic rim, where young civilizations were just beginning to reach for the stars. Humanity had found new students to teach, new problems to solve, new communities to nurture until they, too, could stand on their own. "The galaxy we left behind has learned the most important human lesson," Admiral Hanul concluded. "True strength comes not from being needed, but from teaching others to no longer need you. You no longer need us. That is our greatest success." The transmission ended with coordinates to a communication relay that would allow limited contact with humanity for emergency situations only. But the message was clear. The galaxy was on its own now, and that was exactly how it should be. In the former council chambers, now mostly empty, Councillor Veltar sat alone in the chair where Ambassador Jinho Park used to address galactic civilization. He finally understood what the human had been trying to teach them for 30 years. Leadership was not about commanding others. It was about helping them learn to lead themselves. The galaxy had learned that lesson at last. and somewhere beyond, the stars. Humanity was teaching it to others who were just beginning their own journey toward cooperation and peace. The emergency alarm echoed through the massive halls of the Galactic Council building. The sound had not been heard for over 50 years, not since the Keth-Volran War had threatened to tear apart 3 star systems. Now it rang again, sending waves of panic through the representatives of 47 different species. Chairman Veltar stood at the center of the great circular chamber, his 4 arms spread wide to call for silence. The tall, blue-skinned Althari leader had seen many crises in his long career, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Around him, creatures of every shape and size filled the floating platforms that surrounded the speaker's podium. Some had scales, others had fur. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. But they all shared the same confused and worried expressions. "Members of the Council," Veltar began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation devices that every species wore. "We face a situation unlike any in our recorded history. 3 months ago, on the 15th day of the 7th galactic cycle, every human settlement, ship, and station went completely silent. A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegate, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish, pulsed with nervous colors. The reptilian Quark's representative hissed softly through his breathing apparatus. Even the usually calm, ethereal beings seemed to shimmer with anxiety. Veltar activated the large holographic display that hung in the center of the chamber. Images of human colonies appeared one by one. New Sol, the agricultural world that fed 12 sectors. Harmony Station, the busy trading post near the Rim territories. Earth itself, the blue and green planet that had been humanity's home for millions of years. All of these locations, Veltar continued, stopped responding at exactly the same moment. No distress calls, no emergency signals, no requests for help. They simply went dark. The Quark's delegate stood up on his platform, his long tail swishing behind him. "Chairman, surely some humans remain. What of Ambassador Kim Dao? She was scheduled to attend our trade discussions just last week." Veltar's expression grew even more serious. Ambassador Kim Dao was last seen entering her quarters 3 months and 2 days ago. Security recordings show her walking calmly down the corridor, speaking to no one, carrying nothing unusual. She entered her room at 14:30 Galactic Standard Time. At 14:31, all monitoring devices in her quarters stopped working. When security forces entered the room 6 hours later, she was gone. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Representatives turned to each other, speaking in dozens of different languages. The translation devices worked overtime, creating a symphony of electronic voices. "Order! Order!" Veltar called out. "There is more you must know." The noise died down as he activated another set of images. These showed the last recordings from human locations across the galaxy. On New Sol, Colony Administrator Li Su could be seen walking through the agricultural domes, checking on the massive farming equipment that fed billions of beings. Everything appeared normal until the recording suddenly cut to static. "This pattern repeated everywhere," Veltar explained. "On mining station Kepler 442, human workers were seen going about their normal duties. On the diplomatic vessel Harmony, Captain Park Jin was reviewing star charts on his bridge. In every case, the humans appeared calm and purposeful. Then, at exactly 14:31 Galactic Standard Time, all recordings stopped. A new voice spoke up from the chamber. It belonged to Trade Minister Kixtall of the Merchant Coalition, a spider-like being with 8 intelligent eyes. "Chairman, forgive me, but humans were never that important to galactic affairs. They were useful as mediators, yes, but surely their absence cannot warrant this level of emergency response." Veltar's 4 hands worked quickly on the control panel. New data appeared on the holographic display. showing trade routes, supply lines, and economic networks that spanned the galaxy. "That is where you are wrong, Minister Kixtal," Veltar said quietly. "In the 3 months since the humans disappeared, we have learned something that none of us realized before. Look at these supply chains. The display showed red lines cutting across the galaxy, marking broken trade routes. Green dots that had once indicated functioning systems now blinked red with warning signals. Choi Hana's agricultural collective was responsible for food distribution to over 3 billion beings," Veltar continued. "Her farms did not just grow food for humans. They fed the Zephyrian colonies, the Korks mining worlds, and even some of our own Althari settlements." More red lines appeared on the display. Yun Quan's mining operation supplied rare elements to every major shipyard in the galaxy. Without those materials, new vessel construction has dropped by 60%. The chamber had grown very quiet now. Even the usually chattering Piplin representatives, small bird-like creatures known for their constant noise, sat in complete silence. "Nam Sori managed the largest neutral banking network in the galaxy," Veltar went on. "She processed payments between species that refused to deal directly with each other. Without her systems, trade between 15 different civilizations has completely stopped." Minister Kixtal's 8 eyes blinked rapidly. "But surely humans told someone about these operations. They must have had partners, assistants, backup, systems." Veltar shook his head slowly. "That is perhaps the most disturbing part of all this. It appears that humans deliberately kept the full extent of their operations secret. They worked through shell companies, used automated systems, and managed their networks in ways that made them appear much smaller than they actually were." Security Chief Ralvin, a heavily armored beetle-like being, stepped forward. "Chairman, my investigation teams have visited 17 human worlds. What we found makes no sense. The colonies are intact. The buildings are undamaged. Equipment is still running. But every human is simply gone." "Gone how?" asked the ethereal representative, her voice like wind chimes. "That is what we cannot understand," Ralvin replied. "On New Busan, we found meals half-eaten, but the food had not spoiled because preservation systems were still working. On Titan Base, we discovered personal belongings laid out as if their owners planned to return at any moment. There are no signs of struggle, no evidence of forced evacuation, no indication of panic or fear." The display changed again, showing security footage from various human locations. In every video, humans could be seen going about their normal activities. They worked, they ate, they talked with each other. Then, at exactly the same moment across the entire galaxy, every recording ended. "We enhanced the final moments of footage from the Harmony," Veltar said. "Captain Park Jin was on his bridge running standard system checks. We can see him receive some kind of message on his personal communicator. He reads it, nods once, and walks to his command console. He enters a series of commands that we have been unable to decode. Then he turns to face the camera directly. The image zoomed in on Park Jin's face. The human captain looked calm, almost peaceful. His expression showed no fear, no sadness, no anger. He simply looked into the camera for a moment, then reached over and turned it off. That was the last anyone saw of any human anywhere in the galaxy, Veltar concluded. The silence in the chamber was complete now. 47 different species, representing thousands of worlds and trillions of beings, sat quietly as they tried to understand what they had just learned. Veltar looked around the chamber, seeing the confusion and growing fear in every face. The human disappearance has created gaps in our civilization that we are only beginning to understand. Food shortages are starting in 12 sectors, critical materials are running out, and we have no idea where they went or why they left. The emergency alarm continued to echo through the halls, a constant reminder that the galaxy had lost something it never knew it needed. The first food riots began on SciFiPrime exactly 1 week after the emergency council session. The beautiful crystal cities of the Zephyrian homeworld had never known hunger, but now their floating markets stood empty. The gentle, jellyfish-like beings drifted through their transparent corridors in confusion, their bodies flickering with colors that showed fear and desperation. Governor Zeth-Ira floated before the massive communication screen in her office, speaking directly to the Galactic Council. Her usually bright purple skin had faded to a worried gray. "Honored council members," she said, her voice translated into dozens of languages, "our people are starving. For 3 generations, we have depended on food shipments from the human, agricultural worlds. We never learned to grow our own crops because human food was cheaper and better quality. Now our storage facilities are empty, and we do not know how to farm our own planet." Similar messages were flooding the council from across the galaxy. The Quark's mining colonies, deep underground on airless worlds, had run out of the special breathing mixture that human chemist Bok-Miran had developed for them. Without it, the reptilian workers could not survive in their tunnel systems. Thousands of miners were being evacuated to the surface, leaving valuable ore deposits untouched. Trade Minister Kixtail sat in his web-shaped office, surrounded by holographic displays showing the collapse of galactic commerce. His 8 eyes moved rapidly as he tried to track the growing crisis. Red warning lights blinked everywhere, marking trade routes that had stopped working, supply chains that had broken down, and entire economic sectors that were failing. "How did we not see this?" he muttered to himself, using his natural speech instead of the translation device. His assistant, a young piplin named Tweeka, fluttered nervously nearby. "Sir," Tweeka chirped, "we are receiving reports that the Nexus banking system has completely shut down. All interspecies financial transactions have stopped." Kixtal turned 3 of his eyes toward his assistant. "That is impossible. The Nexus system handles trillions of credits every day. It cannot simply stop working." "The system is working fine, sir," Tweeka explained, her small wings beating rapidly with stress. "But it requires authorization codes that only Nam Sori knew. She was the only human with access to the central financial networks. Without her, no one can approve large payments between different species." The minister's remaining 5 eyes focused on his displays, showing the economic data in real time. Trade between the Althari Empire and the Merchant Coalition had dropped to 0. The ethereal beings could not pay for the energy crystals they bought from the Quarks. Even simple transactions like buying food or fuel required human approval codes that no longer existed. "Get me a connection to the Vorthon Technology Institute," Kixtal ordered. "Surely their computers can break these codes." Tweeka's feathers ruffled with embarrassment. "We tried that, sir. The humans designed their security systems very well. The Vorthon computers estimate it would take 400 years to break just one authorization code." Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Kethmos, factories that had run smoothly for decades were shutting down one by one. Chief Engineer Volcaron stood in the main control room of the largest manufacturing plant in the sector, staring at screens full of error messages. The massive facility, which produced ships and equipment for dozens of different species, had ground to a complete halt. "What do you mean the infrastructure is failing?" he growled at his technical staff. His lead technician, a nervous young Keth named Morval, held up a data pad with shaking hands. "Sir, the entire facility was designed by a human engineer named Bok-Miran. She created integrated systems that we do not fully understand. The power distribution, the atmospheric controls, the manufacturing processes, they all work together in ways that only she knew how to maintain." Volcaron's 4 arms crossed angrily. "We have our own engineers. We built machines for thousands of years before humans ever left their planet." "Yes, sir," Morval replied carefully. "But human designs were more efficient. They used less energy, produced better products, and cost less to operate. Over time, we replaced all our old systems with human technology. Now, without their maintenance, protocols, everything is breaking down. The same pattern was repeating across the galaxy. On the research station orbiting Sigma Draconis, scientists discovered that their most important experiments had been secretly managed by human researcher Han Jisoo. She had been monitoring dangerous cosmic phenomena that could threaten entire star systems. Without her constant adjustments to their detection equipment, the scientists could not tell if a solar flare or gravitational anomaly was approaching their worlds. Dr. Peltares, the station's chief scientist, floated in zero gravity, before a wall of dead monitoring screens. The tall, thin, ethereal being had worked alongside Han Jisoo for 15 years, but only now realized how much she had been doing behind the scenes. "She never told us about half of these systems," he said to his research team. "I thought she was just collecting data for human colonies. I did not know she was protecting all of us." His assistant, a crystalline being from the resonance worlds, chimed sadly. "The early warning system for gamma-ray bursts has been offline for 2 months. If a burst had occurred in our direction, we would not have known until it destroyed our entire sector." Back on the Galactic Council station, emergency meetings were being held around the clock. Representatives who had barely noticed humans before were now desperately trying to understand what their species had actually been doing. The more they learned, the more worried they became. Security Chief Ralvin presented his latest findings to a small group of senior council members. "We have discovered that human mediator Ryu Taiho was secretly preventing a war between the Helios Federation and the Dark Star Alliance. He had been conducting private meetings with both sides for 8 years, keeping them from attacking each other." Chairman Veltar's forearms gestured in alarm. "Are you saying that without this human, we might have a major war?" "Not might have, Chairman," Ralvin replied grimly. "We do have one. The Helios Federation attacked 3 Dark Star outposts yesterday. They blame the Alliance for the human disappearance. The Alliance has responded by mobilizing their battle fleets. Without Ryu Taiho to mediate between them, both sides have returned to their old hatred." The reports kept coming. Human logistics companies had been quietly managing the movement of goods between species that refused to work with each other directly. Human translation services had been providing communication between groups that spoke completely different languages. Human maintenance crews had been keeping ancient alien technology working long past its normal lifespan. Minister Kixtal finally understood the scope of the disaster. He stood before the full council, his 8 eyes dim with exhaustion. "Honored members," he began, "we face total economic collapse within 6 months. The humans were not just participants in our galactic civilization. They were its foundation. They handled the jobs that no one else wanted to do, solved problems that no one else could solve, and kept systems running that no one else understood." The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. "Without them," Kixtal continued, "our civilization is falling apart. We must find the humans and bring them back, or everything we have built together will be lost." Outside the council chambers, across the galaxy, the crisis continued to grow. Ships drifted helpless in space without human navigation services. Colonies went dark without human power systems. Trade networks collapsed without human management. And still, no one knew where the humans had gone or why they had left. The search fleet arrived at Earth on a cold Tuesday morning. 50 ships from 20 different species formed a loose formation in orbit around the blue and green planet that had been humanity's home for millions of years. Admiral Kethtar of the Galactic Investigation Force stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the world that should have been bustling with activity. Instead, Earth was silent. "Sir," reported his communications officer, a young Althari with nervous purple skin, "we are receiving automated responses from planetary defense systems, but no direct communications from any human settlements." Admiral Keth Tar had led investigations on dozens of worlds, but he had never seen anything like this. "Take us down to the largest city. Sensors show it should have 20 million inhabitants." The landing party consisted of investigators from 6 different species, each chosen for their particular skills. They wore full environmental suits, not knowing if the atmosphere was safe or if some disaster had struck the planet. Their shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere and landed in the center of what humans had called New York City. The scene that greeted them was impossible to understand. The city was perfect. Buildings stood tall and clean, their windows sparkling in the sunlight. Streets were empty but showed no signs of damage or decay. Traffic lights still worked, changing from red to green to yellow in their endless cycle, even though no vehicles moved beneath them. Parks were green and well-maintained, with automated sprinkler systems watering the grass and flowers. Dr. Yelnara, a tall, ethereal being who specialized in abandoned civilizations, floated above the street while taking readings with her instruments. "This makes no sense," she said, her voice like soft music through the translation device. "The city shows all signs of recent habitation, but no life forms register on any of our scans." Investigator Mordak, a heavily armored Korx with years of experience in missing persons cases, walked carefully down the empty sidewalk. His clawed feet clicked against the concrete as he examined the area around him. "Look at this," he called to the others, pointing at a small cafe with tables set outside. "The tables still have cups on them. Food is preserved in stasis fields. Someone left in the middle of breakfast." The team split up to cover more ground. Each investigator wore a communication device that kept them in contact as they explored different parts of the city. What they found was the same everywhere, a civilization that had simply stopped, as if someone had pressed a pause button on an entire world. In an apartment building on the east side of the city, security expert Ziktra found something that made her 3 hearts beat faster. The insect-like investigator had excellent eyesight and was trained to notice details that others might miss. In a kitchen on the 15th floor, she discovered a handwritten note stuck to a food preservation unit. "Admiral," she called over her communicator, "you need to see this." The note was written in simple galactic common language, the universal script that all species could read. It said, "To whoever finds this, we are safe. We had to leave quickly. Take care of the plants on the windowsill. We will be back when it is safe." The Kim family. Similar notes were found throughout the city. Some were longer, some shorter, but they all carried the same message. The humans had left willingly. They were safe, and they planned to return when something was no longer dangerous. What could have made them all leave at the same time? Wondered Dr. Yelnara as the team gathered in the city's central plaza. And what danger were they talking about? Admiral Keth Tar studied the notes they had collected. "We need to check the other human worlds. Perhaps we will find more clues there." The investigation fleet spent the next 2 weeks visiting every major human colony. New Sol, the agricultural world, was exactly like Earth. Crops grew in automated farms, tended by machines that needed no human guidance. The Colonial Administration building was empty but clean, with computers still running and displaying status reports on farming operations across the planet. In the office of Colony Administrator Lee Su, investigators found detailed records of food production and distribution. But they also found something else, hidden files that required special access codes to open. Dr. Yelnara's advanced technology eventually broke through the security. These files contain correspondence with someone called Deep Space Monitor. "Station Omega," she reported to the team. "The messages talk about unusual readings and concerning developments in Sector 777. The last message is dated 2 days before the human disappearance." On Harmony Station, the massive trading post near the Rim territories, investigators found the personal quarters of Captain Park Jin. The human's room was neat and organized, with books about stellar navigation and photos of various alien friends he had made during his diplomatic career. But in his desk drawer, security expert Ziktra discovered something unusual. "It is a personal journal," she announced to the team. Captain Park Jin wrote about his concerns regarding deep space observations. Listen to this entry. Received classified briefing from Dr. Song Yeji today. What she showed us changes everything. The Council is not ready for this information. It would cause galaxy-wide panic. Some of us are discussing other options. The journal entries became more worried as they continued. Park Jin wrote about secret meetings with other humans, about difficult decisions that had to be made, and about a plan that would require great sacrifice. The final entry, written the day before the disappearance, was short. The order has been given. We leave tomorrow. May the galaxy forgive us for what we must do. Admiral Keth Tar felt a chill run through his scaled skin. Who is this Dr. Song Yeji? And what did she discover that was so terrible? The investigation team searched through every database they could access, but Dr. Song Yeji was not listed as living on any of the major human worlds. However, they did find references to her in the records of several different colonies. She was described as a deep space researcher who operated a monitoring station in the Outer Rim territories. Sir, reported Communications Officer Telvin, I have found something. There are records of supply shipments to coordinates in empty space, far beyond the last inhabited systems. The shipments were marked as going to Research Station Omega and were signed for by Dr. Song Yeji. Admiral Keth Tar made his decision quickly. Set course for those coordinates. We need to find this research station. The journey to the Outer Rim took 3 days. As the investigation fleet traveled farther from the galactic center, they left behind the busy trade routes and inhabited systems. Out here, space was dark and empty, with only distant stars to light their way. When they finally arrived at the coordinates from the supply records, their sensors detected something impossible. There, floating in the emptiness between stars, was a massive research station. It was clearly of human construction, but it was enormous, much larger than anything humans were supposed to be able to build. Sir, whispered the sensor operator, the station is still active. It is powered up and appears to be fully operational. Are there any humans aboard? Admiral Keth Tar asked. No organic life signs, sir, but there are active computer systems, and we are receiving an automated signal. The signal was simple but clear. Investigation Fleet, please approach Docking Bay 7. Answers await you inside. Admiral Keth Tar looked at his crew, seeing the same mixture of excitement and fear in their faces that he felt in his own hearts. After months of searching, they had finally found something that might explain where the humans had gone. Take us in, he ordered. Let us see what secrets the humans left behind. As their ship approached the mysterious station, Admiral Keth Tar could not shake the feeling that they were about to learn something that would change the galaxy forever. The humans had disappeared for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it had been important enough for them to abandon everything they had built. Soon he would understand why.